Hey everybody, this is Dr. Tim. I'm here with my co-founder of Project Next, Sarah Blessing. Project Next, as you know, if you've been watching, and if you haven't, thank you for coming to us and hearing about what we're doing. We're trying to make people's lives better. The media as it exists today is dividing us. There are people on the left, there are people on the right, and they are just coming at us with all this negative news. Our ideas here are to be positive, to look at the goodness, to try to give facts, to say where we don't know things and where we do know things. And this show is called Dr. Tim. I myself am an emergency doctor, and I'm here to share knowledge about what's going on in the world. Today, we're going to talk about telemedicine, something that's very near and dear to my heart. We'll talk about my history there, but there's a lot going around right now about how telemedicine is going away for Medicare and other places. We're going to address a lot of that. And then measles. There's an outbreak in Texas. There are people who have measles all across the country right now. New York, there was just a case. It's in the Midwest, it's in the South, it's in the East, it's in the West. So we need to look into that. And then we're also going to have a moment of vulnerability, talk about some blood transfusions that I've had, blood transfusions in general, and what that means. So, Sarah, how are you feeling today?
I'm medium. My 6-year-old, one of them is sick today, and I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I'm okay. How are you doing?
Okay. I'm good. I mean, we're talking blood transfusions. I am a little anemic today. So that means that my red blood cell count is low, which means red blood cells give oxygen to your body. So it's kind of like working underwater a little bit. So, I've gotten used to it, given the energy, being able to be out there and try to help people even when that happens. But yeah, today's not the greatest in terms of how I'm feeling.
I honestly don't know how you do it. I've been with you on some of our mini adventures over the last few months, and I don't know how you do it when you're low energy. I'm
Yeah.
impressed.
Well,
You probably do too much, but I'm very impressed with
yeah.
my friend who deals with health issues. So,
Yeah, I mean, you need your blood, and
yeah.
so yeah, you need your blood, and it's funny. Our organs, we have some selfish organs in our body, and we have some givers, some people who are some organs who are genuinely givers to the rest of the body, including the selfish ones. So one of the selfish ones is your brain. It is the one that needs the most energy. When you eat something that's sugary, the first thing to take that energy is the brain. It
Huh.
says, give me that sugar. And then the heart is another one that says, gimme, 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 gimme. And nerves in general say, gimme, gimme, gimme. And the reason for that, evolutionarily, think about it, like we need those two things to survive. We need there to be. And then there are others that are less demanding, like the liver and the muscles. They like to store up that sugar so that, like when you're sleeping at night, how does your brain get food? The liver is just so nice to the brain, and it releases it and gives it. So the
That is
reason I say,
fascinating. I did not know
yeah,
that.
yeah, the reason I say that, and your muscles release it as well to give it there, kidneys too sometimes. So um, the reason I say that is because same thing with blood and the oxygen in your blood. It needs to get to the vital organs are pretty, like the brain, are pretty are sensitive, and so when you're low in blood, the first thing to happen is your brain starts to have to work overtime and figure out a way to work without as much oxygen.
Huh, that's interesting.
Hmm.
Okay, take us into we got a lot to talk about today, and I
Oh
know
boy.
somebody stayed up and did their homework last night on, measles. So,
Hmm.
let's get into telemedicine. What are you gonna
Okay.
tell us? It sounds sad. Your intro bummed me out. Okay, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So telemedicine is a little bit better news. So there's been some tweets out there that started this, where people are saying telemedicine is going away in April, on April 1st. And legally and congressionally, in terms of bills, that's true, but it's very likely, like almost very, 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 very likely that telemedicine will not go away, and it will be renewed on April 1st, and we
Oh,
will
okay.
have telemedicine here to stay.
Phew.
But so what happened is that the Medicare website updated just recently, saying at the end of March, April 1st, telemedicine will expire. The laws that we have will expire, and from that, a number of people kind of looked at that and said, "Oh my God, telemedicine expires. This must be because Republicans are cutting the budget and they're taking away this from us." Well, we'll see. Maybe that is part of what happens with the budgets that we have going through. The next one that needs to happen by March 15th. But it's very unlikely. Why? Because telemedicine is a bipartisan effort. So it is one of the few bipartisan things that we have left here.
Let's keep it that way, please, or let's get more, but let's not get rid of that one. Yeah.
Right. It helps rural people.
Everybody needs it. Yeah.
There is a huge industry around it, including hospitals that need it. And Senator Thune is the majority leader, Republican, and the majority leader in the Senate. And so, what does majority leader mean, by the way? That means the Republicans have the majority of people of the 100 people in the Senate right now. 53 of them are Republicans, 47 of them are Democrats. And so they have the majority. The person who's the leader of that right now is Senator Thune. And his state has one of the leaders in telemedicine in it. So their employer, the hospital, they're the system, big employer as well as big donor. So the people who are in it. So that's something that will very unlikely, he'll be behind it. So
April Fools, everybody. We most likely don't have to worry about this. Deep breath. That's good to know, because sometimes that media profiting off of our anxiety and our fears doesn't explain the whole story. Yeah. So thank you.
And let me say, so telemedicine, it's really obscure. I'm going to use this word because some people might want to look it up. Look up the Social Security code 1834M. M as in Mary, if you really are interested in it. This thing is a waiver. We waived it during the pandemic, and it allowed telemedicine to really take hold. It said anyone anywhere can have telemedicine, and we're going to pay for it as Medicare, equal to as if you had an in-person visit. That's what it said. And from there, we were able to have just a boom of telemedicine in the US, which saved millions of people's lives, kept a whole bunch of people from having to go to the hospital when COVID was uncontrollable at that moment in March and April and May of 2020. And so it was a great thing. But it only lasts so long. And so it became this thing where every time it came up and the waiver was going to go away, Congress would say, okay, we're going to waive it another 6 months. We're going to waive it another year. We're going to waive it. And so that's been happening. We're just on the next waiver moment.
Okay.
Which is April
we're
1st.
Just in a state of panic. I get why people are freaking out. Things are nerve-wracking right now. A lot of change in the government. Yeah. So it makes sense. But this is good news. And if something happens, if it doesn't happen, I'm sure we'll get on and you'll tell us and what we can do about it. But for right now, we don't need to worry about it.
The right thing to do by Congress would be to make this permanent. People need this. Make it permanent.
Right.
The reason that they're not making permanent is simply because how the budget works. If they made it permanent, now when you hear how much debt we're in,
it would go up.
It would go up. It would go up significantly. Why?
And they like to use that. Whatever side likes to use that against the other side.
Exactly.
So
so by making it permanent, what happens when you hear these budget numbers of the budget's going to cost this amount of money? What happens is when you make it permanent, it's a 10-year window. It says this is how much it's going to cost in 10 years. It's going to cost that much in 10 years anyway, right? But the gamesmanship that happens is that
I hate all that. I just
your numbers
just put humans first and work it out and work together and stop being, I wouldn't call them children because my children get along better than this. Just get along and compromise and do things to better humanity.
Right. And so if Congress waives it for 6 more months, now the only thing that goes on the budget is 6 months of
which is way smaller than 10 years.
Way smaller. And
You
so,
sure taught me something today. So
yeah,
yeah.
that's how it happens. And so it's, we need some real leadership that says we don't care about the weird things that are going on in terms of the rules of how the budget is reported when they know it's the same if it's 6 months or 10 years, but the game of politics means they're going to make it 6 months. So let's do the right thing and get rid of that 10-year rule. Think about it as a
This helps everybody. We should just be able to have it. Yeah.
yeah. And if you can't get rid of the 10-year rule, at least be bold enough to say, "Hey, and explain to everybody what's going on. That you've been playing in a game for years with this waiver." And
Oh
say,
boy. Can you
"Yeah,
imagine the politicians all of a sudden being humble and being like, look, I messed up. I was worried about your, could you just see them?
yeah,
We would just be like,
right."
if
And
only we could
so,
get some better politicians in office. Hmm.
right.
Yeah.
And right now, while it's all about, hey, how do we cut costs? And, and the Republicans are really about cutting costs right now, but there are many Democrats who are about cutting costs right now, too. Especially in the more moderate ones. Look at what Tom Suozzi has to say. I just saw a good clip about that. That's a Democrat who talks about budget responsibility. All these people want to show the country right now that we're serious about cutting costs. Yet at the same time, the way they're doing that is by lying's a hard word, but misleading us by having the 6 month waiver that they'll probably do.
And they always want to shine a light on how great they are.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless of the actual truth. And we just want the actual truth. And that's why I appreciate the Dr. Tim show. And I feel fortunate that I get to be the one learning and asking the questions. So
Yeah.
thanks.
There's this letter that was written to Congress with all the stakeholders in telemedicine. It was hundreds of hospitals and telemedicine companies and physician groups and other things that said, hey, you can't do this. You need to renew it. It's you look at it, it's billions of dollars worth
Or I
of
was going to say, the
economy.
lobbyists of the telemedicine people yeah, they're going to be pushing to do the right thing. So, okay. Well, I'm
Yeah.
not figuring this one anymore. So,
Mhm.
check mark, move on. Thank you. Good job. Okay, let's get into a hard one. Somebody did like 4 hours of homework yesterday on measles so that they can get all the information as accurate as possible. I'm always like, Tim, just tell people you don't know something and you look it up. But he's like, nope, I'm going to be an expert before. So,
Yeah, and let me say, I know about measles, right? I'm
which
a
you do.
doctor, but I've never seen a case of measles.
Oh,
I've
wow.
never treated someone with measles.
Oh, my
And
gosh.
when I was doing some deep diving research, and I've been doing it for a couple of weeks, and yesterday really just went down a rabbit hole, just asking myself hard questions to say, can I answer that? I'm not sure I know the numbers on that, etc., the research. And so then I started reading. But one of the things I saw a lot of videos of infectious disease experts, like leading experts that we know of in the US, being like, I've never seen a case of measles.
Oh, wow.
It's just not something that has been around, right? But now we're having outbreak, and we've had outbreaks in the past too, in the past here and there.
And
But the
we're vaccinated, right? The majority, like when I was a little kid, my parents were not anti-vaxxers, so I had the normal vaccinations. I had a measles vaccination, right?
Yeah, so two things. One thing, the phrase anti-vaxxers, people who are hesitant about vaccines, reticent about it, have gripes about it, or have real concerns about it, or religious reasons for not having vaccines. They don't like that term.
Oh, okay. Well, I apologize. Sorry, I used the word you don't
No,
like.
that's all right. That's what we're doing here, right? It's just we use
What
it.
should
So
we call them?
Uh, so a lot of the medical literature calls it vaccine hesitancy.
Okay, that does sound much
So
friendlier. Vaccine
yeah, I mean,
hesitancy.
yeah. So, but we can ask someone who's really what they want to be called. There's just like anybody
Or
you ask.
just call them
You
their
want to be
first name, but I was just grouping
Yeah,
them together. Yeah.
that'll work. Yeah, people, right? People, our neighbors.
Yeah, our neighbors who
So
feel this way,
yeah, we
or
can
yeah.
try that. But secondly, yeah, so there have been some outbreaks here and there in the past, and they've always stayed small. And the reason for that is that the goal is that 95% of the population or more is vaccinated. Over the last four, and that really gives us great immunity as a population. The That's the goal. However, over the last 4 years, for the first time, um, the first time since we've had the vaccine, really, and ramped it up, we've been under 95%. So as a country right now, we're at 93% about.
So we're at a scary number. We want 95 or above, and we're at about 93.
Right. And so
Okay.
93 is not bad, but it's, it's starting to wane. Indiana, so is out about the national average. So I think it was 92.7 right now. I looked it up. It was about the national average of 93. And then there are some other places, some counties in particular, where it's getting low. And one of those counties is Gaines County in Texas, where it's at about 80% right now.
Oh, wow.
And so there's been an outbreak in Texas, between 100 and 200 people getting measles.
And then you've got doctors that most of them have never seen it before.
That's right, and they're getting trained right now. This is what it looks like, and
right.
These are the things that it can do. Right?
It sounds like a stressful day at work.
Medical school. We learned that in it's on my boards, right? And like you have this picture of someone who has measles and a rash that comes with measles, and you have to say, "Oh, that's measles," and it has this lesions in your mouth that happen that are look like sandpaper almost. And
are they painful? It sounds painful.
It is painful, but let's talk about what measles can do to you. So my point of saying that is you see these pictures when you're training for medicine and like, oh, that's measles. It's like a board question, but never really see
You don't have to worry about it. We have a vaccine for it.
Right. And a lot of the world has been vaccine has been protected for it. So, what is measles? Measles is a virus. It's called rubeola, is the actual virus, and measles is the disease that you get from that virus. Like most viruses, there is no real medicine out there that can kill that virus. And so once you get it, that becomes a real problem. That said, if you're not vaccinated and you get measles, you've been exposed to measles and you have it, it'll take you up to a couple weeks to get sick. And so in the meantime, you can get the vaccine to trigger your immune system to kill it, have your immune system kill it. So if you've been exposed to measles, you got to go to your doctor right away and see if you should get the vaccine or not, even if you've had it in the past. It could be something that can be helpful. It's dangerous and deadly, especially to children if they're not vaccinated. So it causes pneumonia. It causes what's called encephalitis, which is brain swelling. Whenever I say the word itis, 81-year-old, should I get the measles vaccine? I will talk about that in a moment. And the answer maybe yes, maybe no. So I'll give you how we're going to go through that. Thank you for that question from the audience. So I will address it. Brain swelling, right? And this brain swelling can cause developmental delays in young people and can cause death as well. It also affects your eyes and can cause blindness. I usually don't like to scare people. Measles is scary.
It sounds like it. That's why we're so thankful we have a vaccine.
Yes, exactly. And the vaccine became available in 1963, which starts your question about being 81. It became available in 1963. And the first vaccine, and then it was first vaccine, and then we had another one that happened in 1968. And so before that, about 3 to 4 million people were getting the infection of measles every year. And
in the whole world or the country?
The country.
Okay.
In the country. And, the country is smaller during then at that time. And so about 500 people died every year from it. About 50,000 people were hospitalized. So all those people who are hospitalized, especially kids, now 50,000 people were subject to having developmental delays from the virus before there was any vaccine. And at the 1,000 of them or so suffered encephalitis, the actual brain swelling.
Ooh.
That doesn't include the many who went blind from it, and the many who just had a terrible experience, were out of school for a long time and not getting the education they needed. The effect on the economy, the effect on parents who have to stay home but can't get close to their kids. Like it's a mess, and it's a bad disease. So it was very bad before we had this. And then in 1963 we had the vaccine. So let me tell you about the vaccine. There are many different types of vaccines out there. This vaccine is called a live attenuated vaccine. What does that mean? You can have live vaccines or live attenuated. The first one in 1963 was live, and then the next one we made in the late 60s was live attenuated. Live means I give you
some of the measles.
Excuse me, it wasn't live. Sorry, one more time. It wasn't live. It was dead. All right.
Oh, okay.
So in 63, it was killed, meaning
okay.
You just gave a killed version of the virus, and then let your body try to attack that virus and get an immune memory to it. All right. That doesn't do as good of a job. It starts to wane. It starts to eventually starts to go away in terms of your protection when you have this killed vaccine. When you have a live attenuated means the word attenuated means stretched out or thinned in terms of its effectiveness and efficacy, in terms of how well it is getting you sick. And so the live attenuated virus, and I'm going to be referring to notes often here so that
this is a lot of facts.
Right. Live attenuated is much longer lasting, needs fewer doses, and gives you lifelong protection for most people. And the way that it works is kind of in a petri dish. You have the live virus, and then you put it in kind of conditions that make it have to struggle, and it starts to mutate to try to figure out what to do. And mutations, we always think of mutations as like adding something to our body, or cancer is a mutation so that now it can metastasize, now it can be really aggressive. Most mutations are actually the other way around, where it gets worse or dies because the mutation happens. And so these viruses, they mutate because you put them in this condition, and you get it to a point where it's just barely surviving. So it's a really weak virus.
Right.
You use that proteins
that
for
makes
that.
Sense.
And use it
so you're not going to get real sick. You're going to get a little bit. You might get a little bit of symptoms, a tiny few of them, but your body's going to figure it out and make immunities, and then that's stronger than the dead one.
That's right. And
okay, so Liz, my one of my most important people in my entire life, my mother-in-law, she asked the question. She's 81 years old. She's had the vaccine. Should she get another one? I'm going to guess, based on your information, she needs to find out when she got it to see whether it was the dead version or the alive one. And if it was the live one, she'd be okay. And if it was the dead one, she needs another one.
So yes and no. So if you lived before 1963, there is some people think, well, you probably were exposed to the virus at some point, and so you probably have immunity. So what you need to do if you're before 63, which if you're 81, you were born before 63. If that's the case, you go to your doctor and they can do titers. They can look and see how much antibody you have floating around.
Is that just a blood test?
Just a blood test that says, okay, we have this antibody floating around because you have what's called natural immunity. You were probably exposed.
What if you just skipped that step and just got another shot? Would it hurt you?
No. And so you'll talk about that with your doctor, and we'll talk about side effects and risks of the vaccine. So there are always risks, and we need to talk about them and be really truthful about them and what the studies show.
Right.
What are called epidemiologic studies, meaning big populations. You look at big populations to get real data. There's a lot of little studies out there. We never make medical decisions based off the little studies.
Right.
Because when you do really big studies, you start to see that maybe the little study was just a small part of the people that you were supposed to be talking to.
You're bringing back words that are making me feel like I'm in the pandemic again.
Yeah, I mean, this is an epidemic, right? Right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's
Hey,
yeah.
I
So,
know these. I didn't used to know these words, but I know them now.
okay. So if it's before 63, you should talk to your doctor. They could do a titer. If you've been exposed, definitely you should be getting that MMR vaccine. Oh, I haven't said what MMR is, but getting the vaccine, yeah,
Okay.
called MMR. We'll talk about that in a second. If it's in the in between time, you didn't have right. If you got the vaccine between 63 and I believe 68, so call it 70 just to be safe. Um, that time when it was the dead virus, not the live attenuated, then you've been worn. It's worn off, and people didn't have measles, so you weren't exposed to it during that time.
So this might be my parents.
Yeah,
Yeah, besides
it
just my
might.
mother-in-law. So they usually watch the show. I'm gonna make sure they watch this one,
Yeah,
and then follow up. Yeah.
yeah. So
So
those people need to get it.
our older population, this is really useful and we should let them know about it because the 80% in Texas sounds scary. I'm glad it's 92.7 in Indiana. That sounds a
Mhm.
little bit better, but still we want 95%.
Yeah, 95
Yeah.
is where it's been shown that it really stops it in its tracks. Um, and so, yeah, if you are in there, if you had it after call it 1970, um, the overwhelming chances that you're fine.
Okay.
You don't need it.
So I'm
Um,
1980. You're 1981, 3 weeks younger than me. We're good.
if you went through, normal,
Yep. I went
call
through
it
all my
public
normal shots
school,
as a kid.
and went
Yeah.
through your shots and followed the vaccination, you're fine.
I remember a lot of coloring books and McDonald's chocolate sundaes were my reward from my dad after I got my vaccines.
Yeah.
I don't remember the shots, but I remember how fun it was to get the coloring book and the sundae.
So the live attenuated vaccine that we have is commonly referred to as MMR, which stands for mumps, measles, and rubella. These are three different diseases that we can get that are all really bad in their own way. And we put it all together. And the reason we put it all together is they act very similar. They're all live attenuated.
And then
Right?
you only have to take one shot instead of three.
Yeah, two shots.
Two
So
shots. Okay.
one
Two
shot,
times.
two times,
Okay.
right? For all of that. You take your first shot by between 12 and 15 months. If you've had it before 12 months, it does not count for school vaccination or army vaccination or whatever,
Huh.
military. It does not, because your immune system isn't strong enough at that time to really give you enough protection. So 1 year to 15 months is the first one that you need it, or anytime after that, but we recommend 1 year to 15 months. And then a second dose around 4 years old. And so, which is right before kindergarten. Right. And so the goal is to make sure you have at least one dose before the first day of kindergarten, and get that second dose shortly thereafter or before you start kindergarten. And again, that's the 95% goal. We want 95% of kids.
So I'm immediately realizing the major problem here. If children can't get this until they're a year and a little older or a little older, then these are going to be our most vulnerable population that we cannot protect because
That's
they
right.
can't get the shot. They can't get the vaccine yet.
Yep. That's right. And so, uh, you know, again, measles gives almost everybody who has it a rash. They call it like a broken egg rash. So think about breaking an egg on your head, because it starts up here and starts to go down to
Oh,
the rest of your body. Fever, rash, cough, runny nose, red, watery eyes is what most people will probably get, right? A bad virus, right, is what most people get. But we talked about what happened before there were vaccines. You can actually get worse things. Ear infections that are really bad can cause very big complications, diarrhea that just doesn't go away, pneumonia, brain damage that we talked about, death. These are the things that happen to people. So we have almost, it's hard to call it this because it's uh, but people use this as a word, but like what's called a natural experiment, where something happened naturally, or sociologically that just happened, and we study that thing because it gives us we can't do it ethically otherwise. And so in
Right.
Samoa, the number, that 95% number that we want, fell to 31%.
Whoa.
Yeah, back in 2019. And so a lot of people got measles. Was a country of 200,000 people, and when it fell to 31%, 5,700 people had it. That's about 3% of the population got measles.
Wow.
That was 9%, 8.5% of the unvaccinated population. So if you were unvaccinated, you had a 9% chance of getting the disease. Almost 2,000 were hospitalized, and 87 kids died under the age of 2.
Oh, that's terrible. It's so preventable.
Yeah. And so I would love to tell you all about that story, but let's go back and talk about the vaccine, because it really leads into why
Okay.
people are hesitant to, may or may not be hesitant about it. So the vaccine has, before I start that, one thing I didn't mention, which is the treatment for measles when you have it. So
Mhm.
it's supportive. You just support them through it. It's not much you can do. Like, give them
It's sort of
fruit.
like when we first got COVID, you just treat the symptoms.
Right, before we had a real, you just treat the symptoms. The one thing you can do that's going to be good is vitamin A. It's not curative, but measles likes to eat up all the vitamin A in your body. And so you need to replace that vitamin A.
Oh.
The reason I want to make sure I talk about this is because you should not be taking a whole bunch of vitamin A right now. It will be bad for you. All right. Vitamin A supports the immune system. It supports vision. It does other things for your body that are good. And so having that daily recommended amount that you see on the back of a vitamin bottle is what you want to do. If you have too much, it actually gets stored in your body, in your fat. And there are 4 vitamins, A, D, E, K, that get stored in your fat. So if you have too much of it, it gets stored in your fat, stored in your fat, stored in your fat, and kind of leaches out into your blood, and you get way too much of it, and then it could do negative things to your body.
I've
So you
heard
don't.
of negative things happening when people take too many vitamins. Like I just take one multivitamin and I take
Mhm.
one probiotic. That's it. Um, but
And
I've heard
people,
of people taking they're taking just tons, suitcases full of each vitamin individually, and then it ends up hurting them.
right. And so A, D, E, K are the ones that really can hurt you because your body stores it. Most of those other ones, unless you're taking a ridiculous amount, just kind of flush through your body if you don't need it.
That's
So, like
interesting.
vitamin C, for example, people take like 1,000% of what you need.
And it's
And
okay. You just flush it out.
yeah, I mean, if you have so much of it that you're like anything, you go crazy. You put 10,000% in your body, I'm sure it'll do something to you. But yeah, that's why that's okay to take.
Yeah,
So,
because you can take vitamin C drops and stuff. That all makes more sense now.
so
Thanks.
you
'Cause
you
that's
hear
one
a
of
lot.
those questions I had that I didn't really know. I knew that taking too many vitamins was bad, but it's good to know the specific reasons. Yeah.
Right. And so you're like, people say, like, I take so much vitamin C. Like, they say it on the back of the bottle that I'm taking, 1,000 milligrams, whatever it is. And they're like, why can't I take a whole bunch of vitamin A to make sure I prevent myself from having Well, no, you can't. It'll hurt you.
They're all different. So
They're
that's
all
important
different
to know.
things. One vitamin is not like another vitamin.
Right.
So that's vitamin A. The vaccine itself, um, as much is one of the safer vaccines that are out there. It does have let me say it right. It has a mercury derivative in it. Very, very small amounts. Most of them actually don't anymore, but some of it has a very, very small amount called thimerosal. Thank you, thimerosal.
Never heard that word before.
And so you see a lot of talk about thimerosal on the internet around, this is the thing that is causing bad things to happen to our kids because we're giving our kids mercury.
Now,
Um,
me as the parent, I bet that the percentage of harm from my child taking this vaccine with the tiny, tiny amount, I would imagine that outweighs the negative aspects of my child getting measles.
that's right. And the amount that you're getting, if you're even getting it, is just so small that the effects of the thimerosal is not there. The reason we know that, and so at first we didn't know that or not. It seemed like that was true, and the reports were, okay, we don't have enough studies to tell you that it's definitely true or
So
not.
that probably helps spread the fear and the misinformation like wildfire, since we didn't know for
Yep.
sure.
Since 2001, we have had 5 really large epidemiologic studies in the US, in the UK, in Denmark, and in Sweden. And they've all shown that it doesn't lead to negative effects, especially autism. It's not linked to autism, and that the vaccine is not linked to autism. The reason people worry that a lot of these vaccines are linked to autism, and no matter how much evidence you put in front, they're concerned about it. You have right to be concerned. The reason is because you're getting it at the same time that most people start to show symptoms of autism.
Right. Which
And so
is
you're like,
around the age of when they start talking,
right. And,
walking,
and so when do you get the first
potty
shot of
trained.
this? Right. The
Right.
first shot of this is
Right.
12 to 15 months.
Yeah.
It's right when these developmental milestones are developing in us, and you start to see the expressions of autism. So you're
I've
like,
seen negative effects of this in my own um in family. Um and it's so painful because I love all of them that's involved, and I've seen mothers choose not to vaccinate the rest of their children because one of them has autism, and they believe that's the reason. And I just am hopeful that they don't get sick, or that they don't get a baby sick. And when it's their emotions and their child and their fear, it's so hard. And my heart goes out to people. I'm not judging them. I just, it's a painful thing because it's your children, and those are the most important things to us in our life. So, yeah, keep talking. It's such a sensitive stuff. Just know I have so much empathy for all of this. This is hard.
I think for me that I've come to about vaccination hesitancy is that we need to respect the fact that science and faith are often not they're not coming from the same place necessarily, right? And so when you start using science to describe faith or faith to describe science, those languages don't always overlap, right? They don't overlap. They might have some overlapping nature to them. There's a lot going on around physics and religion, and and the existence of God versus not, and there's overlap, and people study these things. Where's the overlap? But you have to study it to even find the overlaps in many ways, right? So you talk different languages, and different parts of you, different parts of your whole self are being used to understand this, and they're not really coming together. So if one part is stronger than the other, and how do you make something stronger than the other? Well, you see something in the world that affected you or someone you loved, um, and it's there, and so you see that, you have belief, you have faith around it, versus looking at an epidemiologic study from Denmark, right? And so that's science, right? And so these two things don't always kind of come
And
together.
every once in a while, science gets it wrong when it's brand new. And then they use that as evidence for why you shouldn't trust the studies that are more factual.
Right. Because
Yeah.
science says, hey, but if you really read those things, most of the time it'll say, we can't make a conclusion here. And so when that's said, you can't make a conclusion here. And you see this in politics all the time too, when like one of these reports come out and says, we can't make a conclusion that this person's a liar or a crook or something like that. And they're like, yeah, I'm absolved. And no, like we just couldn't get to the conclusion. That idea. So uh, a lot of times in the beginning, when we're doing the studies, you can't come to a conclusion. Hey, scientific community, I did this study. It told me I couldn't come to a conclusion. So don't waste your time doing that study anymore. Do something else, right? That's the communication that's happening in science. And then it's not necessarily interpreted well. Scientists are pretty poor at interpreting well what that means for people.
So
Not
I
everybody.
saw this during the pandemic when we have a new virus, COVID, and science scientists got some things wrong at first and then corrected it as we figured it out. And then
Mhm.
I saw the disinformation people take it and run with it as why we shouldn't trust the new stuff that was coming out that was more true because this was happening real time. And measles is different. Measles has been around for a long time. We have these studies, like you said, I think you said 5 worldwide giant studies. Um, so I just want to recognize since measles is not COVID, we have a lot more information, a lot more scientific facts around it. It does not, the vaccine does not cause autism. We
Yep.
know that as factual evidence proven over and over and over again. I just think it's interesting. I just want to point that out. These two things, COVID and measles, are different because one is much, much older.
Yeah, much older with good evidence with a vaccine that really has
Right.
much more effectiveness actually than the
Yeah.
COVID vaccine
Right.
in terms of protection. Not that the COVID vaccine doesn't give protection. So that's one problem. The other problem is that science and government and people who want the science to be 100% true will not talk about the negative things that a vaccine does. Because vaccines do negative things too. Like you said earlier, there's these side effects like, swelling at the where the arm is and fever, etc. But there
Hmm.
are some bad things that vaccines can do. It just happens at such a smaller rate than the good things that it does. That said, some of those smaller rate things can be really bad for you, that one person. That one person can have something
We
terrible happen to
we
them.
talked about that the last Dr. Tim, episode 4, with the Gillian, whatever that guy's name is,
Guillain
syndrome.
Barre. Yeah.
Guillain-Barré, yeah.
Mhm.
Because I actually know 2 people that have had that.
Right.
So yes, um,
And
I'm
that
proud. That's
messes with
why
your
that's what
brain.
stands this show stands out because you'll actually tell us the honest truth, and then we
Yeah.
can make the best decision with the actual facts. Okay,
So
so
let's
tell
let's
us.
do a closer look at the safety data. I'm going to look at this and say it because I don't want to get these numbers wrong.
Yeah, got
This
it.
is
I
important
appreciate you
because
working so hard to tell us the facts here.
yeah. So the first thing is to talk about is what are called febrile seizures from fevers. So first of all, seizures from fevers are completely different than the seizures that we have when we have epilepsy
My
or
14-year-old has had fever seizures. It was terrifying, but he was fine.
right. So it's super
Super
scary.
scary, so scary.
My
He
nephew
got it
had
when he
a
was like 3.
kid turns blue, stops, breathing. You're like, what is happening? Especially when they're young, it doesn't look like a seizure like this. It looks more like just seizing up and stopping breathing for a little bit, right?
We
But
tested him for cancer, for leukemia afterwards.
yeah, so you're looking
It's
for a reason.
terrifying.
You want to
Yeah,
rule out all the bad
yeah,
things that have
yeah.
happened. But usually it's the fever causes this in the child whose nervous system isn't completely developed yet. And so they have a febrile seizure. And it usually happens to infants and very young kids. And so it's scary. It's bad and so scary. But most of these things are, it stops, it's good, and never comes back. Some
Yeah,
people
so
can have
my
it.
kid, Micah, had it once, and it was, believe me, it was like one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced being a mom. And
I'm so
it
sorry.
was a new mom. Yeah, but he's fine. Everything was fine, and I didn't know fever seizures were a thing. I wish I would have known about him ahead of time because I wasn't there. He's with his dad, and that made it so much worse because I wasn't even there. I didn't know. Yeah, it was scary.
I'm sorry you had to go
It's
through that.
okay. He's fine. So it's good. So I'm glad you're telling people this because if you have a small child and they get a fever that they can't get under control, this is something that can happen. So what are the symptoms? What do they look like when they're having it?
It looks like all different things, but sometimes they stop breathing for a moment, and they're turn a bit blue. And what happens? You call 911. By the time EMS gets there, they're breathing again. They look like a normal baby, or maybe they're a little lethargic or something. But you go to the hospital, and then you usually get admitted. You have the huge workup, and at the end of the day, nothing's there. Or it was a real seizure that happened. Not that this isn't a real seizure, or it was a seizure that happened from something bad. So you have to go to the hospital. You have to get that
Yeah,
workup.
he had EKG stuff. I remember it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
tested a
that's called
bunch
the
of things.
EEG. So,
EEG, yeah,
yep,
yeah, because not the heart, that brain. Yeah.
yeah. The E is just like encephalitis. The measles causes brain. E stands for encephalogram. It's the brain part versus EKG. The K stands for cardiac.
Hard stuff. Got it.
Okay, so febrile seizures. During the 7 to 10 days following the vaccine, the kids who have the MMR as their first vaccine, these are twice as likely to have a febrile seizure. Twice as likely. In kids, and that's for kids who are 12 to 23 months, so 1 to 2 year old. That's when you get that first shot, right? Kids who are younger than 7, very small increased risk of it, approximately, again, 6 to 14 days, so 1 to 2 weeks afterwards. And it happens in about 1 in 3,000 kids. And so that's real.
So it's good to know. Your kid will be fine, but it's very scary.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I know it's in the paperwork when your kid get those shots, but you usually don't read all of them because you're holding a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So you're usually not reading all of them. But I've read some of them and seen sometimes my doctor will highlight the most important parts in those papers. And so I usually go home after the shots knowing what thing could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's good to know if you've got a little kid that's going to be getting vaccinated for this. But it's 1 in 3,000.
1 in 3 to 4,000. Yep.
3 to 4,000. Okay.
And so another thing is joint pain happens, and it's bad joint pain, and joint stiffness. If you're an adult, especially, so women more often than men, and women past puberty, 1 in 4 have this bad joint pain. So
that's a lot, 25%. But does it go away? Is it just
1 or 2 days it's gone?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've had that with just other various shots. I've had my arm is sore and it spreads around and I'm just sore for a couple days.
Yeah. And so that's something that happened, but it could get bad and people are like, oh my God, I feel terrible, right? This
still sounds so much better than the measles to me though, but yes, that's good to know.
Well, there you go. And most people aren't adults when they're getting it, right?
Right.
The other one is called ITP, or I'm going to say the full one, immune thrombocytopenic purpura. Big word.
I cannot repeat that.
What that means is that your platelets drop. You have less platelets in your body. Most of the time, the platelets dropping, when that happens, and it can happen also when you have a regular old virus, this happens to you. When you take certain medications, this happens to you. Unless your platelets are really low, and platelets help clot your blood when.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
That's what they do. Unless your platelets are really low, you're not going to have kind of spontaneous bleeding. But it can drop your platelets down. It can get to the point where you need a transfusion and medications to help with it. So the risk of ITP has been shown to increase in the 6 weeks following the vaccination. And it's about 1 in 40,000 kids.
And this happens in kids?
Yep. 1 in 40,000.
1 in 40,000. Okay. So pretty rare.
It returns to normal.
Okay.
But if it gets really low and you're also someone that already has low platelets, or you took a medication that lowered your platelets at the same time, it could get low where you bleed. But 1 in 40,000 have it and get better. I don't know the number of 1 in what for how many you bleed actually get bad symptoms from it. But most of them just have this dip in platelets. It comes right back.
Does it make you tired? What are the symptoms?
Usually no symptoms at all.
That's weird. Okay.
So there you go. And then here's a scary one.
Okay.
Measles has MMR has caused encephalitis.
And what's encephalitis?
That goes back to that severe brain swelling that you can.
Oh.
So this is super rare, and almost always has happened with patients with weakened immune systems. So people who come in with poor immune systems already, that immune systems aren't working, and get the vaccine. Some of those people. So if you have a healthy kid, the risk of this happening is nil. There might have been a couple cases that have been reported over the years, And by that, I mean like one or two over the last, decade, 2 decades, 3 decades.
Greater
Just
chance
very,
of winning
very,
the lottery several times than
yeah,
this. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
So, but still, I mean, that would be terrible if that happens to
Right,
your child.
right.
Again, remember that 1,000 people a year were getting. Let me get that number right. 1,000 people a year were kids a year were getting encephalitis before the vaccine started. Right.
So
So
more people get it because of me. Yeah, because of measles than people are getting it from the measles
many,
shot.
many, more, many,
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 many
many
more.
more. So you have more
And
chance
it's
of not getting the shot and getting that than getting the shot and not getting measles. Yeah, yeah. So is there any more bad things?
yeah. And the other thing is that it happens 4 to 9 months after you get the shot. So
Ooh.
that's, yeah, to
So
think about.
to diagnose what the kid has might be harder to realize it's from the shot because it was so long before.
That's right. And
Interesting.
so, yeah, I want to make sure of that. But hear what I'm saying there. These are all such super rare things. But, you know, there's this thing in epidemiology and statistics where there's this cartoon of a blade of grass on a golf course and it gets hit by a golf ball. And the blade of grass is like, oh my God, this is terrible. I can't believe this happened to me. This was always going to happen. It feels like a destiny. It feels like, like this is 100% chance of happening. But then you back up and you look at the golf course and you realize there's 18 holes with all these blades of grass and it was just this one piece of grass, right? But if you're the one piece of grass, it happened to you, and that's bad, and it hurts, and it feels bigger than life because it's life threatening. So, but the most likely thing is that you're one of those blades of grass on the golf course that doesn't get hit. Okay.
Okay, I want to sum up what after I'm hearing all this information. Is there more?
There's one more thing we got to talk
Tell
about.
me that, and then I'm going to tell you
Samoa.
my thing. Okay.
Talk about Samoa. Got down to 31%. Why did it get down to 31%? Like, what happened? Well, there was already some hesitancy going on, and some people who were kind of talking about why vaccines are bad in Samoa, and it was starting to drop. And then there are these two nurses who mixed the vaccine with something that paralyzes you, and 2 kids died. And absolutely terrible, right? And
so 2 nurses made a mistake, caused 2 kids to die,
not
and then
because of the
everybody
vaccine, but because of the paralytic that was in the
right.
vaccine that
And
they
then
mistakenly.
I understand parents are scared more shots in that country would be messed up. It makes sense how this happened now. Wow.
Yep,
That's so
that's how
sad.
that really got to it. And again, lots of kids died. Almost 100 kids died. 5,700 kids.
That is so sad.
And it's a country of 200,000 people, right? So a third the size of Louisville.
Wow.
Even less than Indy, for example. So 1/4 the size of our District 9 here, right? Just to give you an
Wow.
idea of how small it is, right? And so, yeah, 9% of the kids went to the hospital. Like or excuse me, 3% of the kids went to the hospital. So, but it's not apples to apples because their healthcare system isn't as strong as ours in terms of.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
You can't take those numbers and say that's what would happen in the United States.
Right.
Right, in terms of deaths, etc., because we're going to be stronger. That said, they came in, they vaccinated everybody, they got it back over 95%. It only took a few months to do, and this really started November of 2019. By January of 2020, people stopped having measles because they vaccinated everybody.
Okay, well, that is the most hopeful thing I've heard you say today.
Yep.
So hopefully this town in Texas that's dipped to 80%, they're going to best case scenario, they listen to this episode. That would be great.
That'd be nice.
They're going to get better information and more vaccinations are going to happen. And
Yep.
this 80% number is going to raise. And you're saying very quickly, we can get this under control.
That's right. It can very quickly get under control.
So anybody watching this, you can inform your loved ones what's going on. And the biggest question is the one that my mother-in-law is asking and Laura's asking, these people that had the vaccine earlier in the 60s and 70s. um I'm going to recommend for my parents and my mother-in-law that they get that test. And is it the test that Laura is talking about here?
Called a TITER. I think it's a typo there.
TITER. Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
Titer test.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So I would recommend they get a titer test
I would
to
recommend
see
that
if
they
they have
talk
it.
to their doctor about getting a titer test
Okay.
because
Okay.
everybody's special. They have different things going on, right? So you just don't go and demand a titer test, but advocate for yourself to say,
Ask. Okay.
I think I might need one. Can we talk about it? What do
Right.
we want to do here?
And then it's a type of they get a blood test and you
Send it
find
off
out
to
in
the
a
lab
couple
and you find out.
days.
Mhm.
And you find out in a couple days. Like I just had a blood test on Monday. I just got my results today.
Yep.
And then
But if you've been exposed, you need that right away because you have 10 to 14 days before this virus is going to take hold in you, and you can get it right now. So,
and then Liz asks, "Can you get measles more than once?" She thinks she had them when she was in elementary school.
no. I mean, no. So
So
that's
get that
Liz,
test then.
that's actually the best um, way of getting immunity is
Just
right.
to
You've
have
had
it.
measles, what you are having, right? So you most likely are fine. But again, you're like, I think I had measles. It could have been something else, right? At that time, right? So you go talk to your doctor.
So Laura said when she had her daughter in 1991, they gave her an MMR booster and said that I didn't have immunity. That's interesting.
And that she didn't have, Laura, or you didn't have
Yeah,
it?
the Laura didn't have it because when she had her daughter, they gave her the booster. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying, and didn't have immunity. Not sure exactly when Laura was born, but that's
Yep. I
interesting.
don't know either. Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I got vaccines every time I had children, I got vaccines in the hospital. A lot of tetanus. I always got a tetanus one.
yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. That was good. Good information. And I'm hopeful we can fix this soon. If we get the right amount of good information
Oh,
like this
yep.
show's providing.
Can I just stop
Oh,
for a second? Laura
yeah.
was born in 1966. She's the perfect case of what we were
Oh my
talking about
goodness.
before,
Thanks,
right?
Laura.
She probably got the vaccine that was the killed vaccine, which is strong, but not strong enough to last into all the way through adulthood.
There
So
you
by the
go.
time it was 1991, right? So, less than, how old were you, Laura? It's, I can do math. It's 25 or so. And so by the time it was 1991, it had worn off, right? If she had
Interesting.
got in 1968, 69, 70, somewhere around there, when the conversion went over to the live attenuated, she'd be fine.
Interesting. Yeah, so that makes me think my parents should get the tests because they were born in the 50s. So yeah, or ask about it.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. All right. Okay. Do we want to save your conversation for next time, or do you want to talk a little bit about it? What do you want
We
to do
talked a little
about
bit in the
your?
beginning. We'll talk. We'll do it next time. What I want to talk about anemia, and we'll do it next time. We'll talk about some of the problems I've had and I'm having right now, actually, and have dealt with for over a decade, and had during the campaign, and wasn't didn't really tell people there. I didn't want to worry people, right? And just was struggling. You knew about it, Sarah, and you knew when I was super tired and needed help and would help me, right? And you had good friends around me at times. But so thank you. But anemia, and we'll talk about. I'm happy to tell you the whole story the next time. What I
Yeah,
wanted to
I
tell you
think
about.
it deserves time. And I'm really proud of you for telling us about your own things because I know that you have this vision of what a person running for Congress and a doctor and a strong leader should look like. But I'm telling everybody there are reasons why you're exceptional. And I'm so proud to be a friend and co-founder with you in this. And one of them is that you've dealt with this health issue for a very, very long time. It has made you more empathetic and brave and just an incredible human. And I think sharing that with the world helps, that sometimes our weaknesses are strengths.
Mhm.
And I've told you this before in phone conversations, when you share with me how you feel, I'm like, I wish you were exceptional for a different reason and you weren't in pain now and you weren't low energy now. But I'm so thankful that you probably would be a great person without the health problems. But I honestly think because of your health problems, you're exceptional. And,
Mm.
I'm just really proud of you that you're willing to talk about it on a live show.
I appreciate it. And I thank you. That means a ton. It's very kind
It's
to
all
say it in front
true.
of
It's all true.
thousands of people right now. Um, so the one thing I do want to mention is that when you have anemia, low red blood cell count, your normal number for women is a little bit lower than men. Men, it's around 14. Women, it's around 12 of your what's called your hemoglobin. That's a measure of how much red blood cell oxygen carrying capacity, like how much stuff you have in your red blood cells to carry oxygen. If it goes lower, you can have anemia and you're really tired, but it needs to go all the way down to like 6 or 7 to be able to qualify for a transfusion.
That sounds really low to me.
That's super low. I've been in the hospital 6 or 7, and it is low. Let me tell you, like it is low. And
Oh,
so,
man.
um, and getting a transfusion in between there is like pulling nails off of people, off these doctors, right? And to say like these symptoms are so bad, I know the risks of getting a transfusion. I would like to take those risks because the benefits for me of like getting back to work, getting back to my life, being with my child. I was anemic when my wife had Cassidy.
Aw.
And so, and she had a long labor, and I'm sitting there being like, trying to be completely, this is not about me. This is about my
No, it's
wife.
about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then the weeks afterwards, we're up in the middle of the night and stuff. I'm a zombie, from anybody is, and my wife needs help, and I'm so tired. It's
It sounds
hard.
hard. It's hard.
So I
Yeah.
would have killed for some blood at that moment, but doctors won't give it because of this 6 or 7. You need to be down to 6 or 7. So what I want to say happens for doctors, and I tell every doctor I meet, is if someone's lower than 12 and higher than 6 or 7, that is where you need the most empathy. That is where you need the most empathy, because the cure for that is iron infusions or taking iron by mouth or these things or various things that can get it up. It takes months and months and months. And that person is exhausted during that time, and it affects everything, including their work, their family, everything about them. And so uh, doctors are so, and this gets back to, science versus faith, etc. You look at these numbers. Oh, in med school, you got to get to 6 or 7 before I even talk to you
And you
about
just
this.
think of it as like a fact thing. You don't think of it as a human thing.
Yeah, get out of here. You're fine. You have it. Like, here's, take this
And
iron. You'll be fine.
you're telling people they're not okay.
That is the time when you are stuck in this limbo moment and you just need the empathy. And so I love telling doctors that and nurses that and other people to say that that's the hard time. Get me down to 7. You're going to give me some blood and it'll get better. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, you get those iron infusions, don't you?
sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, I've been around you enough to see you after some of these things. And you don't want to share how you feel. Like when it's a negative feeling, you don't want to share. Everyone, you just tell me a tiny bit. And if you're telling me a tiny bit, I'm like, oh, it's worse than he's letting on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just wonder how many people this affects. Do you know how many people are anemic
I don't
and
actually know those numbers. And so next time when we really prepare for a show about it, I'll tell
'Cause
my own stories
I've
and
been this
talk
way
about
a couple
anemia in
times in
general.
my life, and it was
Mhm.
very hard, and I'm really glad I don't have it all the time. So
Yeah.
it gives me more empathy for you, I think, just because I've had a little bit. So yeah, we definitely need to talk about this more next time.
Yeah.
What a great episode. I hope all of us appreciate Dr. Tim Peck's homework of studying like 4 hours last night. I just want to say thank you for that. I hope that it
Yeah.
helps as many people as possible. Please share this episode. Share it wherever you're watching it or listening to it. If it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, podcast, and send it to any friends or family members that this could benefit from. So I think just knowing the facts helps all of us because we all have friends and family. Like I have my own family. I'm going to make sure know about the measles thing. Um, so this is, our whole point of Project Next Media is to make your life better. And I really love that the Dr. Tim show does this medically. What an important thing we need when there's so much misinformation and disinformation about medical things out there. So
And
thank
I hope
you.
we're showing this moment of empathy, understanding for people who prioritize their faith, prioritize the being that blade of grass that got hit, being someone seeing these awful things happen in their life, and why those things overpower emotionally, intellectually, the idea of a study in Denmark that tells us, we
It's
should have.
hard. And
That's a
then they
really
don't
hard
know
thing
which
when you have.
studies to believe, and they don't know which studies are better than others. And you do. You're saying these bigger studies are trusted and there's multiple of them. You're like, we know this.
Yeah,
Whereas a
and I'm not
tiny
only saying it
study,
because
yeah,
I went through, and I certainly did not read through all these studies completely, but I went through them a bit last night. And there's a expert panel that's been put together that went through these studies, etc., and looked at all studies and said these five are the biggest, the best. Let's look at these. They were done the best, and from that showed there wasn't any connection of autism to the
yes,
MMR
that is a
vaccine.
very important one to make sure we realize that is fact based. We know 100%. A measles vaccine does not cause autism. We know it. It is
Yeah,
fact.
yeah.
But I'm not, my heart goes out to parents that believe it. I care about them and I feel for them and I get it. It's your kid. I get it. It's hard. So yeah, thanks for explaining that. If you have ideas for the show, I think we got the measles idea from one of our friends that texted it to me and I sent it to you and you're like, oh yeah, this is a thing. If you
Yeah.
have an idea, you can either, if you're friends with us, send it to us, or you can just put comment on our show and we'll make sure Tim sees it because we want to address your valid concerns. So we can talk about multiple things in this hour show. So send us your issues that you are concerned about. We want to help you. And
Yep.
we'll probably be back probably next week. Um,
Yeah, we'll find a time for next week. Might be a bit different because of some things going on with our schedules, but yes. And then we're gonna do a doctor and a priest
oh,
walk into a
that's right.
podcast after this. Yeah,
Right after this,
we
I
have we have
love
Father
I
Ted
love
standing
Father
by to go
Ted.
to the next one.
I
Yeah,
love him so much. Yeah, so stay tuned. It'll be on in like 5 minutes after this. We just got to get it ready with the tech stuff.
yeah.
Love that Father Ted. I mean, come on. And there it's an uncle and a nephew. It's really sweet. Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time and stay tuned for a great discussion with a brave priest and a brave doctor. Bye
All
you
right,
all.
awesome. Goodbye. Thanks.